You are listening to the story The Bloodline revealed on the Velvet Audio Stories channel. Breaking your
Chapter 12. The Offer from the Shadows. 3 days later, Dominic had to fly to Switzerland to handle an underground rebellion within the board of directors. Before leaving, he doubled the number of bodyguards around the penthouse. Don't let yourself slip out of the camera's view, Avery. The world out there isn't as safe as you imagine, he warned, his ash-gray eyes filled with a cautionary glint before he boarded the helicopter. However, Dominic had underestimated one thing: Luna's curiosity and Avery's defiance. That evening, while she was tucking the two children into bed, Avery's phone, a device already fully monitored by Dominic, suddenly received a strange signal. An anonymous video call appeared. Avery hesitated, then pressed accept. The face that appeared on the screen was Julian Vane. He was sitting in a lavish office, sipping red wine, a half-smirk on his face that was full of charm but hidden with venom. "Hello, almost sister-in-law," Julian began, his voice as smooth as velvet. "I imagine my brother has you locked in that luxury glass cage, pouring threats about me into your ears, right?" "What do you want, Julian?" Avery asked coldly, her hand gripping the phone tight. "I want to save you. And save my poor nibblings as well." Julian tilted his head. "Do you think Dominic will ever let you be free?" "No. When the chairmanship election ends, he will officially turn you into a display piece. He has fake medical records for you, Avery. He can declare you mentally unstable at any time to claim absolute custody." Avery's heart skipped a beat. She knew Dominic was capable of that. He was a man who always prepared every contingency. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have what you need most: disappearance." Julian pulled out a set of new passports and ownership papers for a farm in the French countryside. "I've prepared everything. An escape route by sea, no traces, no cameras. I don't need your money, Avery. I only need you to sign a statement accusing Dominic of coercing you for the past 5 years. As soon as he is stripped of his executive power, you and the children will be free forever in Europe." "My father is involved in this too, isn't he?" Julian burst into laughter. "He's just a cheap pawn. You're much smarter than him. You have 2 hours to decide. Either become the wife of a monster, or become a free mother." The call ended. Avery stood frozen by the window. She looked down at the brilliantly lit streets of New York, feeling as if she were standing between two abysses. On one side was Dominic, the violent ruler who had protected her from her father. On the other was Julian, the man promising freedom but harboring the ambition to topple an empire. "Mommy," Leo's voice sounded behind her. The boy stood there, holding a small tablet. "Uncle Julian is lying to you. I hacked into the call signal just now. He's in contact with a human trafficking group at the New Jersey docks." Avery was stunned. Leo's gray eyes looked at her, terrifyingly calm. "I don't like Uncle Dominic, but he is the alpha wolf. Uncle Julian, he's just a hyena." Just then, the penthouse door burst open. Dominic walked in, his black overcoat still carrying the chill of the Swiss snow. He saw the phone in Avery's hand and her pale face. Dominic didn't say a word. He walked straight over, snatched the phone, and hurled it against the wall. The sound of it shattering was dry and sharp. "Were you just about to betray me for Julian, Avery?" Dominic growled, an aura of lethal intent radiating from him that seemed to freeze the air in the room. Avery looked up at him, devoid of fear. "If you didn't lock me up like a prisoner, I wouldn't have to listen to anyone." Dominic laughed coldly. He stepped closer, pinning her against the wall, his hand lightly squeezing her chin. "Then get ready. The wedding will take place tomorrow morning. I'm not waiting until next week. I'm going to stamp my ownership on you before the hyenas can even touch a hair on your head." The battle was no longer just between factions. It was the war within Avery's own proud heart. Chapter 13. The Wedding in the Storm. Manhattan's dawn emerged through steam-fogged glass, gray and heavy. The entire penthouse tower trembled under the frantic preparations for an event the press called the wedding of the century, but for Avery, it was a sacrificial rite. The world's top makeup artists and designers surrounded her, draping her in a handmade lace wedding gown encrusted with 1,000 tiny diamonds. Avery looked into the mirror. Her face was as soulless as the ancient paintings she once restored. She was no longer the free Elena Vance of London. She was Dominic Vane's most expensive ornament. "Mommy, you're so beautiful." Luna lightly touched the hem of her mother's long skirt. She and Leo were also dressed in miniature formal wear, looking like cherubs stepped out of a myth. Leo leaned in, whispering into Avery's ear. The building's security system has been breached from the outside, Mom. It's not Uncle Julian, but a third party. I've installed a counter-strike command. If anything happens, run toward the private elevator. Avery squeezed her son's hand. This child was too much like his father, always calculating every move in advance. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis was completely locked down. The financial and political elite held their breath in anticipation. As the orchestral music swelled, the massive doors swung open. Dominic stood at the end of the aisle, his black suit making him look like a proud god of the night. His ash-gray eyes locked onto Avery, containing a frenzy of longing and possession. But just as Avery reached the middle of the aisle, the lights abruptly cut out. A massive explosion echoed from the basement entrance. Chaotic screams filled the space. A group of armed special forces, wearing no insignia, stormed in from the rear doors. Dominic Vane, you are under arrest for international financial fraud and illegal detention. A booming voice rang out over the loudspeakers. It was Julian. He stepped out from behind the troops, holding a stack of documents. Accompanying him was Silas, Avery's father, who was looking at her with a triumphant glint. Avery, daughter, come to father. Silas roared. He's about to fall. The military is outside. Dominic didn't flinch. He nonchalantly pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and a plume of white smoke rose in the dim shadows. He didn't look at Julian, he looked at the watch on his wrist. 5 minutes, Dominic said, his voice deep and terrifyingly calm. It took 5 minutes for all of you to show yourselves. Immediately, the ballroom's large screens flickered to life. It wasn't evidence against Dominic, but a live video of Julian negotiating with the international criminal organization Leo had discovered the night before. Julian, did you think I didn't know you bribed a few corrupt officers? Dominic smirked. But you forgot one thing. I don't own the police. I own the financial system that feeds them. The special forces suddenly turned their weapons toward Julian. The truth was revealed. This was a trap within a trap. Dominic had used this wedding to lure all his enemies out of their dens at once. In the chaos, Silas tried to lunge toward Avery to take her hostage, but a small shadow darted out to trip him. It was Leo. Don't touch my mom, Leo shouted. Dominic strode over, lifting Silas with one hand and tossing him aside like a bag of trash, while his other arm wrapped tightly around Avery. He leaned close to her ear, his voice hoarse. I told you. This Manhattan is mine. You and the children are too. The battle ended swiftly in blood and the humiliation of his enemies. Dominic turned to the priest trembling in the corner of the stage. Continue, Dominic commanded. I want to hear the vows right now. The storm outside is over, but the life of the Lady of Vane has only just begun. Avery looked at the man beside her. He was both her brutal savior and her darkest ruler. She understood that from this moment on, she would never be able to escape the grip of this wolf again. Chapter 14. The Aftermath of the Storm. The wedding ended in a terrifying stillness. The elite guests departed with ashen faces, understanding that from this moment forward, Dominic Vane's power in Manhattan was inviolable. Julian had been led away in chains, while Silas had vanished without a trace. Dominic hadn't killed him, but he had cast him into a financial dungeon where he would spend the rest of his life paying off his debts. In the opulent penthouse, Avery sat on the silk-covered bed, her shoulders trembling from exhaustion. The heavy wedding dress now felt like a suit of iron armor. Dominic walked in, loosening his tie. His expression held none of the triumph expected of a victorious groom. He approached and placed a black dossier on the vanity. Do you think I found you in London just because I wanted to possess you, Avery? Dominic asked, his voice hoarse. Avery looked up at him. Is it not? You have shattered my life for the second time. Open it. With trembling hands, Avery opened the file. Inside were not Vane Corp documents, but surveillance photos of her and the 2 children in Notting Hill taken 3 years ago. In every photo, there was always a shadow lurking nearby, men with scorpion tattoos on their necks. The Scorpio organization, Dominic said grimly. They weren't hunting me, they were hunting you, because of the Lost Queen masterpiece you restored. Avery was stunned. That was just an ancient masterpiece. No. Beneath that layer of paint is an encrypted map to a multi-billion-dollar digital asset vault belonging to assassinated oil tycoons. You are the only person in the world who touched it without damaging the hidden microcircuits beneath. Dominic dropped to one knee before her, and for the first time, A rare spark of sincerity appeared in those ash-gray eyes. For the past 5 years, I never truly let you go. I deployed a covert task force just to protect the 3 of you from a distance. If I hadn't brought you back to New York, if I hadn't publicly declared you the Lady of Vane, Scorpio would have abducted and tortured you until you decrypted that painting. So, the explosion at the ceremony. Theirs. Julian was just a disposable pawn they manipulated. Dominic lightly squeezed her hand. I made you a public target so I could legally protect you as my wife. Here, there are missile defense systems and my private army. Out there, you are just an anonymous restorer who could be easily crushed. Avery realized with a shock that the freedom she had long craved was actually an illusion. She had always been in the eye of the storm, and Dominic was the only fortress preventing that storm from obliterating her. Just then, the door burst open. Leo walked in, holding a tablet with a flashing red light. Dad, the boy called him Dad for the first time, his voice dry, making Dominic freeze. Our satellite system just scanned an unidentified fleet approaching Long Island waters. They have the Scorpion insignia. Dominic stood up abruptly, the instincts of a tyrant resurfacing. He turned back to Avery, his eyes burning. Welcome to the Vane family, Avery. From this moment on, we are no longer enemies. We are an alliance. He handed her a small, gold-plated pistol, a weapon that had been hidden within her wedding bouquet. Keep this. Never trust anyone but me and the children. The real battle had only just begun. Chapter 15. The Frozen Alliance. The penthouse transformed. With a single snap of Dominic's fingers, the rare oak-paneled walls slid aside, revealing multi-layered radar screens and a state-of-the-art armory. The warm golden light of the wedding night was replaced by the cold blue hue of electronic consoles. Avery looked at the small gold-plated pistol in her hand, feeling the icy metal seep into her skin. She was no longer a restoration artist. She was being dragged into a life-or-death chess game where the stakes were the lives of her children. Leo, Luna, to the safe room immediately. Dominic commanded, his voice as sharp as a military order. I'm going, but I've left a gift in their ship system, Dad. Leo looked at Dominic, his ash-gray eyes unwavering. If they enter New York territorial waters, the lead ship's engine will self-lock. Dominic froze for a second, his gaze sweeping over his son with undisguised admiration. Good. Go. As the 20 centimeters thick steel door slammed shut, protecting the 2 children, the room was left with only Dominic and Avery. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Dominic stepped closer, roughly tearing away the bridal veil still caught in her hair, revealing a delicate yet fierce face. Listen, Avery, Scorpio isn't just a band of debt collectors like your father. They are a shadow empire. The Lost Queen is actually an ancient biological hard drive. You inadvertently activated it when you used that specific solvent to clean the stains. I was just doing my job. Avery snapped. Why didn't you tell me from the start? Because if you knew, you wouldn't have been able to act in front of Julian. Your fear was the perfect camouflage. Dominic pinned her against the control console, his hands flanking her, trapping her. But now, we are married. The title of Lady of Vane is your only armor against international law. Suddenly, a piercing alarm blared. On the radar screen, a pitch-black, unmarked helicopter was diving straight toward the tower's rooftop. They're faster than I thought, Dominic growled, pulling a matte black handgun from behind his back. He turned to Avery, his eyes holding a complex mix of emotions, frenzied possession and forced trust. Do you know how to shoot, my restorer? I survived 5 years running from you. Avery racked the slide decisively, her eyes burning with a fire Dominic had never seen. Did you think I was just a trophy on display? Dominic burst into a haughty, wild laugh. He grabbed the back of her neck, pressing a kiss to her lips that tasted of mint and gunpowder. Magnificent. Our wedding night will be lit by the fires of our enemies. Crash. The rooftop glass shattered, ropes dropped down, and shadows armed to the teeth began to pour in. Dominic shoved Avery behind a steel-reinforced pillar while he lunged into the hail of bullets with the ruthlessness and precision of a king defending his territory. Avery took a deep breath, aiming straight at the man who had just rappelled from the helicopter. A gunshot rang out. This was no longer a forced marriage. This was the birth of a new empire, where love and hate were forged through the crossfire of a common enemy. Chapter 16. The Queen's Code. Bullets hissed through the air, shredding expensive silk curtains and shattering crystal vases. Dominic fought like a true war machine, every shot he fired stripping a life from the enemy. But the Scorpio numbers were too overwhelming. "Avery! To the central server, now!" Dominic roared over the deafening gunfire. He threw her a steel-reinforced portable hard drive. "The building's defense system is being reverse encrypted. If you don't decrypt the Lost Queen, within 10 minutes, Vane Corp's entire security network will collapse, and the children's safe room doors will auto-open." Avery felt her blood turn to ice. Luna and Leo. She could not let them be in danger. She crawled through the hail of bullets, lunging toward the reinforced glass desk. On the giant monitor, the ultra-high-resolution image of the Lost Queen appeared. The layers of oil paint she had once meticulously restored now revealed intricate circuit patterns under ultraviolet light, as sophisticated as a biological labyrinth. "This isn't art, it's a brain," Avery whispered. Her hands, once accustomed to brushes and solvents, now blurred across the virtual keyboard with dizzying speed. Outside, Dominic had just taken down the Scorpio Special Ops commander, but his shoulder was soaked in blood. He stood barricaded in front of her desk, turning his massive frame into a living shield. "Keep going, Avery. 6 minutes left." Dominic's voice was hoarse. "I need a catalyst," Avery screamed. "The code lies in the chemical reaction of the glaze layer." She grabbed a bottle of strong liquor from the shelf and poured it over a biosensor device Leo had pre-built. Immediately, the light points on the painting began to shift. A string of ancient characters emerged, intertwined with modern binary code. 5 minutes. 4 minutes. They've reached the rooftop. A bodyguard's voice crackled over the comms. The office door exploded. 3 Scorpio assassins burst in. Dominic fired his last magazine, then drew a tactical knife from his boot, lunging into a bloody melee. "Done!" Avery screamed as her finger slammed the final enter key. A surge of blue light raced along the walls of the mansion. The building's entire power system cut out and rebooted in fortress mode. Thick steel plates slammed down over every entrance, isolating the intruders. A high-frequency jamming system left the assassins outside completely disoriented. The gunfire ceased abruptly. A deathly silence took hold. Dominic stood in the center of the room, breathing heavily, the knife in his hand dripping blood onto the floor. He turned to look at Avery. Amidst the wreckage of their wedding night, she stood there, her wedding dress torn and stained with blood, but her eyes blazed with an unprecedented power. "You did it." Dominic stepped closer, his bloodied hand gently stroking her cheek. "You didn't just save me. You just took hold of the key to this entire world." Avery looked at the monitor where the data was being converted. She felt no relief. She realized that from now on, she was no longer the prey. She had become the co-owner of this shadow empire. "Dominic," she said, her voice cold and ironclad. "This party isn't over. I want them to pay for touching my children." Dominic paused, then a ruthless, proud smile spread across his lips. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "That is the woman of Dominic Vane. Tomorrow morning, we begin the hunt." Chapter 17, The Global Hunt. Dawn over the Mediterranean did not bring its usual poetic beauty. It burned like blood across the sea's surface as the superyacht Vane Alpha sliced through the waves at breakneck speed, heading toward a secluded private island off the coast of Greece, the heart of the Scorpio organization. On the deck, Dominic stood with his arms crossed, his black shirt unbuttoned at the collar to reveal the bandage on his shoulder from the previous night's battle. He no longer carried the polished aura of a Wall Street billionaire. Instead, he radiated the lethal intent of a king out for blood. Beside him, Avery was clad in a sleek tactical suit, her long hair pulled back into a sharp ponytail. She was intently monitoring a bio-radar screen that she and Leo had fine-tuned together. "We are entering the diffraction zone," Avery said, her voice devoid of any tremor. "If the Queen code I decrypted is correct, their anti-air systems will recognize us as allies for the next 15 minutes. Dominic turned to look at his wife. In the dim light of the early morning, he saw a total transformation. The woman who had fled from him 5 years ago was now operating one of the most sophisticated weapon systems in existence. "Are you sure?" Dominic asked, his hand lightly brushing the holster at her hip. "Once we step onto that island, there is no turning back." "I already died once in New York 5 years ago, Dominic," Avery replied coldly, her eyes burning with determination. "This time, I am going to ensure my children never have to live in the shadows again." The stealth helicopter took off from the deck, soaring in absolute silence. As they approached the Scorpio base, their defense systems, exactly as Avery predicted, were deceived by the Queen identification code. The insertion was swift and brutal. Vane's special forces, under Dominic's direct command, swept through the outer perimeter in less than 10 minutes. Dominic fought with the ferocity of an alpha wolf, but he always kept Avery in his sight, like a protective wraith that never strayed. At the underground command center, the leader of Scorpio, a man codenamed Sand Scorpion, was frantically deleting data. He never imagined that the beautiful prey he had been hunting was the very person bringing the scythe of death to his doorstep. Crash! The steel doors exploded. Dominic stepped in, the handgun in his hand still smoking. Avery followed right behind, her tablet already siphoning every bit of data from their servers. You can't. Sand Scorpion recoiled, his hands surreptitiously reaching for a self-destruct trigger. Bang! A precision shot from Avery shattered his hand before he could touch the button. She stepped forward, looking at her enemy with utter contempt. "This is the price for touching my children," Avery said, her voice flat but chilling to the bone. Dominic stepped closer, in no hurry to finish off the leader. He grabbed the man by the collar, forcing him to look at the screen displaying Scorpio's entire fortune, evaporating, second by second. "You thought you were hunting the Queen for her treasure?" Dominic smirked, the diabolical grin of a demon. "Wrong. You just awakened a monster that even I have to be wary of." The data transfer was complete. The Scorpio Empire officially collapsed financially and informationally in a single breath. As the sun climbed high, the island was rocked by chain explosions from the ammunition depots. On the helicopter returning to the superyacht, Dominic pulled Avery into his arms. He felt her body finally relax after the adrenaline of the hunt. "It's over," he whispered into her ear. "The world will know from now on that touching the Lady of Vane is signing your own death warrant." Avery leaned her head against his shoulder, looking toward the horizon where New York awaited. She understood that her old peaceful life was gone forever, but in this chaos, she had found a new place, not as a toy, but as the co-ruler of an empire alongside Dominic Vane. "Dominic," she called softly. "I'm here. Let's go home. The children are waiting." He tightened his embrace, and a fiery, committed kiss was shared beneath the Mediterranean sky. The hunt had ended, but the era of the Vane Alliance had only just begun. Chapter 18: The Vane Dynasty. The Gulfstream G700 private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport in the deep purple twilight of New York. Stepping down the airbridge, Dominic and Avery were no longer the skeptical pair of a week ago. They walked in unison, synchronized in every stride, radiating a brand of power that made the line of bodyguards along the runway bow their heads in respect. But the New York they returned to was far from quiet. Rumors of the ballroom explosion and the purge in the Mediterranean had spread like wildfire through the financial elite. Tabloids were flooded with headlines about the rise of Mrs. Vane, the woman who had vanished 5 years ago only to return with the power to decrypt secrets the entire world lusted after. "Are we not going to the penthouse?" Avery asked as she noticed the armored Cadillac convoy heading toward the northern suburbs. "No, the penthouse is too exposed for what comes next," Dominic said, taking her hand, his fingers interlacing tightly with hers. "We are going to Vane Manor. It is time for you and the children to take your rightful place in the lineage." Vane Manor was a majestic gray stone castle sitting isolated on a hill in Westchester. This was the ancestral home of the Vane family, a place housing ancient libraries and secret-filled wine cellars. As the heavy iron gates swung open, Leo and Luna were already waiting in the grand hall with the butler. Upon seeing their parents, the two children rushed forward. Dominic dropped to one knee, opening his arms to pull them both into a tight embrace, a rare moment of warmth that shattered his usual icy exterior. "Dad, Mom, did you finish off that scorpion?" Luna asked mischievously, still clutching a circuit board in her hand. "Cleanly, little princess," Dominic kissed her forehead, then turned to Avery with a look full of hidden meaning. That night, a small family dinner was held. But the peace lasted only until the butler entered with a silver tray carrying 10 invitation letters, each stamped with the red wax seal of the Wall Street Council of Elders. "They want to meet you," Dominic pushed a letter toward Avery. "The council does not accept a woman with a mysterious background holding the key to the Queen's treasure. They want to vet the credentials of the Lady of Vane." Avery smiled, a cold smirk that mirrored Dominic's own style. She picked up her wine glass and took a small sip. "Vet, do they think I am still the girl sold by her father years ago?" "I will go with you," Dominic said, his eyes glowing with possession. "No." Avery set her glass down and stood up. Her form-fitting black silk dress made her look like a goddess of the night. "This time, I will go alone. If you want me to stand beside you to rule this empire, I must personally break those who wish to belittle me." Dominic paused, then burst into laughter, a hearty, proud laugh. He stood up, walked behind her, and placed both hands on Avery's shoulders. "Do you know, Avery? 5 years ago I chose you for your bloodline. But today, I worship you for who you are." He pulled a pigeon blood ruby ring from his pocket and placed it in her hand. "This was my mother's ring. She was the only woman who ever made all of Wall Street kneel. Now, it belongs to you." The next morning, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of the council building. Avery stepped out, needing no bodyguard escort, carrying only a tablet and the brilliant ruby ring on her hand. She did not come to ask for recognition. She came to give orders. Behind the frosted glass of the tower opposite, Dominic watched her figure through long-range binoculars. He knew that from this day forward, the name Vane would be associated not just with his brutality, but with the brilliance of the woman beside him. A true dynasty had been established. Chapter 19: The Wedding of the Century. If the New York altar was a bloody snare, then the ceremony on the island of Mykonos, Greece, was the ironclad proclamation of the Vane dynasty. The family's private island now shimmered under the molten gold of the Mediterranean sunset, but this opulence was not staged for the media. It was for a single sovereign, Avery Vane. Hundreds of the world's rarest white roses had been transported by private jet, woven into a long path that ran straight to the jagged cliffs overlooking the sea. The guests were no longer opportunists, but the most powerful figures of the underworld and high finance, individuals standing there to witness the birth of an unbreakable alliance. Inside a sea-facing marble suite, Avery stood in stillness. She wore a wedding gown of midnight black silk satin, a defiant departure from tradition. Strands of black diamonds coiled around her neck and shoulders like chains reforged into instruments of power. On her hand, the pigeon blood ruby ring blazed. "Are you ready, Mother?" Leo stepped in, his small suit making him look like a perfect miniature version of Dominic. He no longer looked at her with anxiety, but with absolute reverence. "I am, my son." Avery smiled, taking Leo's hand. Behind them, Luna looked magnificent in a white voile dress, holding a flower basket while her eyes sharply scanned the bodyguards lining the hallway. Security sweep complete. Not even a fly could infiltrate our kingdom today. The orchestral music swelled, deep and majestic like a triumphal march. Avery walked down the petal-strewn path between 2 rows of bowing guests. She did not lower her head, she did not blush. Her gaze was fixed, piercing the man standing at the end of the aisle. Dominic Vane stood there, his bespoke black formal wear hugging his tall frame. He did not look at the guests, he did not look at the sea. His entire world narrowed down to the woman advancing toward him. As Avery placed her hand in his, Dominic felt her coldness and resolve, a perfect resonance with his own nature. The elderly bishop looked at the pair, his voice trembling slightly. "Before God and these witnesses, Dominic Vane, do you swear to protect and honor your queen until your final breath?" "I do not swear before God," Dominic spoke, his deep voice echoing across the cliffs. "I swear by my own blood. Avery is not my wife. She is the soul that rules me. Whoever touches her, touches their own death." Avery looked directly into his eyes, her vow no less ironclad. "I do not seek protection, I seek partnership. From this day, I wear this crown by my own hand, and this empire is ours to hold together." Instead of a romantic kiss, Dominic lifted Avery's hand with the ruby ring and pressed a kiss of profound respect upon it. It was not the gesture of a possessor, but the submission of a king before a newly crowned queen. That night, fireworks lit up the entire Mediterranean sky. Amidst the flowing champagne and the hollow toasts of the elite, Avery and Dominic stood at the edge of the cliff, apart from the crowd. "Have you achieved what you wanted, my queen?" Dominic wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Avery looked toward the horizon, where the darkness of the vast ocean was being torn apart by the fire of the pyrotechnics. "This is only the beginning, Dominic. Scorpio has fallen, but others will soon realize our position. We have a world whose order needs resetting. Dominic tightened his grip, a ruthless and satisfied smile clear on his lips. This wedding of the century was not the happy ending of a romance. Chapter 20. The Silent War. The honeymoon in Greece ended as swiftly as a dream vanishing into the mist. Avery and Dominic returned to Manhattan, but this time, Avery did not enter the VayneCorp Tower as a wife huddling in her husband's shadow. She stepped in as the senior executive vice president, holding the digital key capable of paralyzing the entire global financial system. The real battle did not take place on wind-swept cliffs amidst gunfire. It unfolded in the 102nd floor boardroom, where men in elegant suits were plotting to topple the Vayne empire from within. The atmosphere in the room was thick with hostility. 12 board members sat around a black marble table, their eyes fixed on Avery with undisguised contempt. At the head of the table, Marcus Thorne, the longtime CFO and a man who had secretly supported Julian, broke the silence. "Mr. Vayne, we respect your marriage. But bringing a painting restorer into the board and granting her access to the security core is an act of madness. What does she know about cash flow or our complex algorithms?" Dominic sat back in his chair, his face expressionless, his ash-gray eyes flickering toward Avery. He said nothing, simply yielding the stage to his queen. Avery smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She placed her tablet on the table, and immediately, the large screen behind her flickered to life, displaying a tangled web of transactions. "Mr. Thorne is right," Avery spoke calmly. "I don't know much about the outdated algorithms you are using. But I do know about the Queen's Code. And I have used it to scan VayneCorp's entire hidden transaction history over the last 48 hours. Marcus Thorne's face suddenly turned ashen as red numbers began flashing on the screen. At 2 a.m. yesterday, a sum of $500 million was transferred from the reserve fund to a shell account in the Cayman Islands, then used to buy back Treasury shares to manipulate the price before the chairmanship election, Avery said, walking leisurely around the conference table. "And this transfer order bears the digital signature of you, Mr. Thorne. You. This is slander. Those are forged documents." Thorne slammed the table and stood up abruptly. "Forged?" Avery stopped right behind Thorne, her hand lightly touching his shoulder, a sensation as cold as a blade. "I have restored paintings thousands of years old, where masters hid the truth beneath dozens of layers of pigment. The black spots in your finances are easier to see than a stain on a canvas." With a single tap on her tablet, Avery went public with the evidence of Thorne and 3 other board members conspiring with Scorpio to sabotage Dominic from the inside. Murmurs erupted across the room. Only then did Dominic stand, striding to Avery's side. He placed his hand on her waist, a powerful gesture of ownership. "Security," Dominic commanded. The boardroom doors burst open. A team of guards in black uniforms entered, escorting Marcus Thorne and the traitors out as the remaining members looked on in shock. The purge was swift, brutal, and entirely silent. The room was now left with only trembling loyalists and the most powerful couple in New York. Avery stood at the position Marcus Thorne had previously occupied, looking directly at those who remained. "From today, the rules of VayneCorp change," Avery declared, her voice echoing with authority. "I do not need financial geniuses who only know how to embezzle. I need people who understand. If you touch the House of Vayne, you will not just lose money, you will lose everything you have ever owned." Once the room had cleared, only Dominic and Avery remained in the vast office overlooking Central Park. Dominic embraced her from behind, the scent of expensive cigars lingering on her neck. "You did better than I imagined, Avery. You are even more ruthless than I am when facing these traitors." Avery turned around, wrapping her arms around his neck, her eyes blazing with pride. "They thought I was your weakness, Dominic. I am simply proving to them that I am the nuclear weapon you are holding." Dominic gave a low, throaty laugh and leaned down to claim her in a passionate kiss. This silent war was merely the opening shot.
If you love the strength of the female lead Avery, please give this video a like, share the video if you want your friends to listen to this top-tier series together. Follow our fan page at link to update the latest release schedule.